Our speakers were given the option of providing a brief biographical description. Peter Boving said that in lieu of a bio, he would prefer centering music to be played. So, before our three speakers share their Odyssey remarks, let's listen to Peter's suggestion, Simple Gifts, performed by Yo-Yo Ma, with vocals by Alison Krauss. Peter, we welcome you to the UUG pulpit as our first speaker this morning.
That was my mother's favorite song. Her mother was a viola player, and I always find that string music is very moving to me. My mother's mother was also the clerk of Camden, Delaware's Friends Meeting, so not Shaker, but Quaker meeting in Camden, Delaware. And my brother also was clerk of that meeting, so I have some Quaker roots that go pretty far back. And meditation is a powerful thing. So I find a lot of spiritual...
Peter, we can't hear you.
That's as loud as I get. So. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to devour the microphone. Except now I can't see my notes. So, there's a very powerful thing when a Quaker meeting is called a gathered meeting, when people start sensing the Spirit at the same time in the same place. I find that's very spiritual when that happens. It's rare, but it does happen. My mother lost her parents at age 10, and she was able to attend George School, a residential school, through the generosity of some folks who had a brewery in Milton, Delaware. So think of that when you have a beer. Do good works. She was also able to attend Swarthmore College, where she met my father. He was the class of 1941, and there was a lot going on in the world in 1941. So my father's mother lived in Washington, D.C., and attended All Souls Unitarian Church, where my father also attended. And his best friend from junior high school days was in the choir at All Souls. So that's one of the reasons I really appreciate this version of Spirit of Life. My father's father grew up in Frederikshavn in Jylland in Denmark. So that's the northern part of the larger peninsula of Denmark. Later moved to Odense on the island of Fyn, which is the middle of Denmark, where Hans Christian Andersen had his little house and wrote some stories you may have heard. My grandfather grew up in a parsonage of a Lutheran church, and I guess he got tired of hearing the sermons after a while. He would bang his head on the side of the thing after hearing his father practice the sermons over and over. And my grandfather decided to be an entomologist, not a pastor. So he looked around Germany and Denmark, and there were no jobs for entomologists, and he didn't feel welcome in Germany. So he came to the United States through Ellis Island in 1914. My grandmother arrived in 1916. After my grandfather's first wife died of tuberculosis, he married my grandmother, and she was a biology student of his when he was teaching in Copenhagen. So that's where they met. She liked to play piano, had a piano in the living room, as did my mother. We had a baby grand in our house that I grew up in. And Christmas at my grandmother's house was magical. It was in the Danish style, which, as you know, has pagan roots. We had the Christmas tree, and Oisengroth, which is food for the Nissaman, who are the little men who come around the barn at night. You don't see them, but they're there. We had paper hearts on the tree, and sometimes they would be filled with cookies or interesting other things. And I like to make cookies and bake bread with my grandmother. She used to say I would knead the bread with emphasis. So that was good. It's always good to have a young boy to knead the bread when you're getting a little old and stiff. So that was fun. My mother played the piano, was in the choir at Towson UU Church and Southern Delaware later. She wrote poetry and brought flowers to church many Sundays. She also liked to tutor younger children, and she was the coordinator of RE at Towson UU Church. So I got to see the lessons before other folks did, because I was the guinea pig. So I'd say I know there's a connecting energy where everything is connected, and we're all star stuff, and we're all connected to the universe. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Our second speaker is Jan Powers. Jan has always lived in Pennsylvania, although in 5 different towns, except for brief stays in Michigan and Wisconsin for grad school. She taught at Gettysburg College for 49 years, but is proudest of having founded the Adams County Heritage Festival and helping to found Mediation Services of Adams County. She currently amuses herself and other senior citizens by featuring twice-monthly lifelong learning programs at Spirit Trust that are free and open to all with curious minds. Jan, welcome to the pulpit.
So 85 years. Maybe we better start at the beginning, but I promise to only hit the highlights. So at age 2, I remember the patterns in the pavement in Narberth, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia. At age 3, we were in Allentown, and I learned that my parents weren't always right. A good thing to learn early if you want to think otherwise. And it happened because my father was pruning the forsythia, and I started sticking the little forsythia twigs in the ground. And my father said, "Those will never grow." And being forsythia, they did. So we moved 4 times. My college-educated parents never went to church. My mother wanted to go, but my father wouldn't go. You'd think they would have figured that out before they got married, but they didn't. So they dumped me off at the nearest Sunday school, whatever it was. So I Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, EUB, Evangelical United Brethren in Christ. I was baptized there at the age of 7, along with my brother. But anyway, this taught me to embrace change and to like finding new horizons. So, have you ever heard the phrase, "You are what you were when you were 10"? Think about it. At that point, I was spending a lot of we were in Pittsburgh by that time. I spent a lot of time wandering around in the woods by myself, exploring land beyond the last line of houses, making maps of ponds and oil wells that I found. Oil wells? Oh, you're mistaken. There aren't any oil wells near here. But of course, later corroborated, yes, those were rocking arms I had found in my explorations outside of Pittsburgh. So roots and trees, wind and sky, earth and water, these have all been extremely important to me all my life. And of course, I find them in the Spirit of Life. That's every time I sing it. I was very active in Girl Scouting. I had camp friends. We had a citywide council. We planned events. There were 6 of us from all over the city of Pittsburgh. We were almost all chosen to attend national or international events These are my dearest friends. 12 years ago, we had a reunion. We've lost 3 of them since then. But we worked in the kitchen, 6 women in the kitchen, just like we'd always cooked over a campfire. No arguments, perfect ensemble. So I went to the World Camp in England in 1957, my first international adventure, which included a week with a Dutch family in Amsterdam. My first experience of scarcity was only 12 years after the end of World War II, and this family was eating bread and cheese, potatoes, and eel. One night we had meat. It was a piece of ham fat. No refrigerator, vegetables in the bathtub, no oven, cake based on the stove top. But camping on the grounds of Windsor Castle, there were girls from many nations. I learned to make tea with a giant tea bag. But evening vespers separated the Protestants from the Catholics, and it separated our group as well. So I learned that the Reformation was still raw in Europe. College, I went to Bucknell. I wanted to be a junior high science teacher, so I was a biology major. But I was also a great reader, so I took a lot of literature courses, and in the process picked up a second major in English. But one of my professors asked me one day, would I like to teach a class to see if I liked college teaching? So I taught a Milton class in Samson Agonistes. Went pretty well. Afterwards she said, did you know the answers to those questions you asked? And I said, no. She said, that's risky business. So grad school at the University of Michigan, I still rode 2 horses, couldn't make up my mind between linguistics and Renaissance literature. But then I won a Rotary International Fellowship for International Understanding. Should I go to India, which is something I'd also wanted to do? I was in a quandary. I asked my Shakespeare professor, famous man, G.B. Harrison, should I go or finish my PhD? And he said, oh, by all means, go to India. He was British. He said, I was in the Indian Army, and I learned more about the Middle Ages and the Renaissance from being in India than I ever did reading a book. So, but it wasn't India, and it wasn't Thailand. My second choice, it was Pakistan. Tough for a single woman. Lived at the YWCA, was being called constantly for dates. I only accepted one. You don't say no to the museum director of Karachi. But he brought a chaperone. He was, a decent man. So I studied Urdu language and literature at the University of Karachi. There were 2 Japanese students who were very diligent, but I took time off to travel to other parts of Pakistan. I volunteered once a week at a refugee camp. It was only 15 years after the violent partition of India. I did intake using basic Urdu, found women who didn't know how old they were. It was easier than studying poetry in class. But then I got hepatitis. I was rescued by a military family. I am going later in October to Arlington burial of the couple that rescued me in Karachi when I was sick. But as an upshot, I'm very comfortable in Islamic countries. My first job teaching English at Gettysburg College, 3 sections of English 101. By the time I got to the 3rd section, I couldn't remember what I'd done when. But 1 course in Literary Foundations of Western Culture, and I taught the Odyssey for 25 years. After 2 years, married, went to the University of Wisconsin, picked up a second master's in South Asian Studies, began work on my PhD, came back to Gettysburg College, and even though I retired formally in 2004, there were 10 more years of part-time teaching. So, but one of the things that happened when I was teaching at Gettysburg was a Ford Foundation grant in Asian studies. So we wanted to start an Indian studies program. I created a 2-course sequence in the civilization of India, 2 courses in Indian literature and translation. So I was teaching all the Indian religions: Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism. I spent time traveling in India. Then also the feminist movement was coming at the same time. That was an amazing thing. There were no women's studies programs that you could take at universities then. So a group of women professors at the college educated ourselves. We were from different disciplines. We set readings for ourselves. We had summer seminars. We developed a women's studies program, and the core course was taught jointly by someone in the humanities and someone in the social sciences. And my specialty became global feminism. I was deeply involved locally in the peace movement during the Vietnam War, in the civil rights movement. I taught the first black literature course at Gettysburg College before there were any black professors on the faculty. Nuclear freeze movement. So this led to involvement with the International Peace Research Association. I discovered I could give conferences, papers, every time there was a conference in some part of the world, and get a little travel money from the college. So I went to South Africa, Australia, South Korea, Hungary, Finland. I always stayed a few extra days to meet with women's groups and find out what was going on with them, what programs they were doing. Found similar programs in every country. Domestic abuse being addressed, family money being spent by men on alcohol and gambling, and the second shift. Whenever women were working outside the home, they had to come home and work inside the home too. Then I went to spots that had external violence. Five different years in Israel and Palestine, Gujarat, India, and Bosnia. And there were 3 books that came out of those adventures. Everywhere I found first women's shelters dedicated to healing from the war, and then after the war in places like Bosnia and Gujarat, they moved seamlessly into handling domestic abuse healing. My last major international work was in Myanmar, 2017, 18, and 19, a month each year, teaching English as a second language in the Chin State, which is the least developed part of Myanmar, Burma, used to be Burma. And my students were Christians and Buddhists because the Baptist missionaries had been very busy there. I was married twice, both times to Gettysburg College professors, divorced twice. Grateful to my first husband who taught me economics, even though we argued about it every morning over breakfast. Grateful to my second husband who taught me how to sail. 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren. My companion for 12 years was a man you knew very well here, Wes Culp, John Wesley Culp, an ardent Unitarian from the time he was a student, a grad student. So that was one way I found the UUs. Bruce Bano was a good friend, and although I gave some talks to UU groups here, when you were meeting at the college, and in York, the group in York, I didn't know anything about, well, are you a Unitarian or a Universalist? And I still don't. So, this might be something we need to address when we do the meetings for prospective members, but it's also something I need to research. Wes loved the forum. So I started, it was during the pandemic, and he was already on his last legs up at Paramount. So I started in on Zoom here during the pandemic. I watched the service. I went involved in the forum. I loved the meditative videos. I still do. If I don't talk to you before the service, it's because I'm watching that. But when I joined this church, I had only been in the physical church twice because it was all on Zoom. What do I believe? Buddhism makes the most sense because in that religion, the individual takes responsibility for living amicably with others. From Christianity, we get compassion. The Sermon on the Mount is my favorite. If you read it at my funeral, you may only use the King James Bible when the English language was at its height. Okay. In Hinduism, Atman and Brahman is the clue to life. Atman is the individual ego. Brahman is the spirit of life. The trick is finding out that Atman is Brahman. And when that happens, it's a bit of a butterfly moment. Ananda, which means bliss. And for some reason I cannot explain that happened to me. I was in Jerusalem when it happened. But the anxiety and depression I'd experienced all my life, you see, I was not an only child. I had a nonverbal autistic brother on whom an operation was performed because they didn't know much about autism then. And he died of a cerebral hemorrhage, cast a pall over our family. So Wes had three, you may not have known this, 3 adult children on the autism spectrum. 2 in Albuquerque, 1 in Hanover. I am their trustee, sending them rent checks, communicating daily sometimes, visiting them, keeping track of medical issues and other problems. And interestingly enough, one of them has been using leucovorin for years. We had never heard about this until our friend, Mr. Kennedy, started talking about autism. But it does seem leucovorin helps. And his email handle is leucovorin heals. But I am doing for them what I couldn't do for my brother. Where do I find peace of mind? Kayaking on the water, by myself, volunteering and organizing, mediating, Juneteenth, Heritage Festival, Pathways to Racial Justice, Human Relations Council, Project Gettysburg Leon, lifelong learning, photography, poetry, kayaking. Thank you.
But I want to introduce our third speaker. Lauren Jean Griffioen is often defined by their job, but would better be described as a writer and community organizer who is passionate about civil rights, punk rock, pour-over coffee, running poultry, combating food scarcity, and being their authentic self. When Tom Petty sang, "You Belong Among the Wildflowers," Lauren Jean believed him and found their way out west. They spent decades traveling before settling in Gettysburg. One of their favorite things has been adventuring with their children Bolt and Kaya, and co-parenting with Pete, who also attends UUG. Lauren Jean, welcome to the pulpit.
Thank you so much, Dick. I'm turning on my little stopwatch timer. Hi, I'm Lauren Jean, human of Gettysburg. And I'm so happy to be here with you all. You mean so much to me. I use they and she. Either one is fine. So my journey started in France, where I was born with my parents, into a family that was rather diverse spiritually, despite Catholic upbringing and Protestant upbringing kind of coming together. But we moved to the U.S. to a very religiously uniform community. I Googled the word that was the opposite of diverse today, uniform. My mother taught at a Catholic school, but despite thinking it was a lot of hokum. I went to a Waldorf school. My parents held a meditation circle, a transcendental meditation circle in the home, and we spent our summers at the Song of the Morning Ranch somewhere in Upper Michigan. and it was beautiful, and we were in nature and staying in a geodesic dome. I remember seeing this placard on my mom's dresser that had a picture of Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and I said, I know who these people are. Who are the other ones? And she said, they're all the same. We talked about past lives and blamed them for anything wrong happening in our lives now. And I was sent to the local preschool at a church and where they taught the Trinity, and I came home and said, so it's kind of sad we killed God? Because I said, I remember asking clarifying questions to the preschool teacher, and I was like, okay, so this dude, this guy, Jesus, is God, and we killed him? Yeah, so God is dead. They're like, I don't know how they didn't connect what was happening there, but my mom was like, maybe this is not the preschool for my child. Shortly after me declaring it's sad that we murdered God, we went to First Congregational Church in Akron, Ohio, where there's this guy, Gabe Campbell, talking, and I was supposed to go to to the religious education stuff. And instead, I just wanted to skip Sunday school and listen to him talk about the spirituality of Star Wars and George Lucas and the power of myth. And I sang in the choir. I made my first best friend, Amanda, hit there. I still thought the Jesus thing made no sense. People told me at different times. My dad said, well, he's kind of like the janitor. And I was like, why do you go pray to the janitor? Why don't you just go talk to the source? Why do I need to be disconnected and go through this other person that's dead? I was very shy. I didn't talk at all. I know that is surprising to anybody who knows me. It used to be that I'm not enough, and now I'm too much. And I invite people to go find someone who is less, because I'm confident, because I have community. But I got to, in my youth, do punk rock church service with my friend Freya. We played bass and guitar and had some drums, and had an amazing youth group with Jody and Wendy, and I met the first love of my life there and had so many great adventures. But I eventually found my way out into the National Park Service, which is very remote. There's really, the closest thing is going to be the Church of God. Maybe there's a Catholic service. There's some different things. And I'd just go wherever and get whatever I could. I'd be like, yeah, that really reminds me of that one song. Okay, those lyrics, that resonates. I'll take that piece or this piece. And I was always filtering things out my whole life and wishing, could there just be a way where people just talked about the thing that mattered, And I'd say things like, just because you bought the box set doesn't mean you need every book. Or just because you bought the box set of cereals doesn't mean you need to have every marshmallow, And that's the way religion was for me. I'd go and I'd try to glean what I wanted. But then I moved to Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, and I experienced culture shock after living all over the U.S. because there was this thing called rampant homophobia and racism, just out loud. People said the words that I was told were bad in 5th grade or earlier. You don't say that. And here I am at the time, married to a man and I seem very heteronormative. I am not. I'm a queer person. And I'm hearing people say these horrible things about me, and they don't know. And then they're inviting me to their churches. And I went to this one Methodist church because I remember the Methodists like the queers. In Boston, they did all the weddings. And in Uniontown, Ohio, they loved me the way I was. So I went there, and I was like, man, look at all the gay people here. Okay, this is cool. The whole church band, okay, cool. I'm going to fit in here. But then I found out they chased off the minister because he told one of the youth members they were not going to hell for being gay. So that didn't work out. But eventually, I found my way. I drive 45 minutes to Knoxville, Tennessee, to the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. And I cried so much all of the first services I went to. I heard my most favorite doxology, but changed into a story about the earth and nature and loving your community members and not fighting in war, but let people living in all lands rise together as one, in love and understanding as one. The youth leader there was a trans woman. For Easter, much like here, we have a scientist come and talk, but there they do a whole, everybody's up dancing the Thriller, the zombie dance. No one ever touched my children without asking, because consent was part of the culture part of the religious culture there. And they didn't call it religious education, they called it religious exploration. And the children were making sandwiches, and they were taking them down under the bridge to folks that needed food. And they also had a lot of programming for neurodivergent people who wanted quiet places. And I could listen to the radio of the service in the baby room when I just could not leave my newborn. So finding that was just life-changing for me. I continued attending that church through the pandemic from Grand Canyon, and I continued attending it when I moved here to Gettysburg. But I ended up moving next door to these awesome young bachelors here and chit-chatting with them, and one of them said, you know, not to be weird, but like, you kind of seem like you might really like the Unitarian Universalist Church, and my mom is like really involved with it. And it turns out it was Chris Eisel's son, Austin, and he invited her over, and we hung out on the porch during the pandemic, and she told me about everything and said, come here. I did. My children were loud, and I was embarrassed and didn't want to come back, but Chris said, no, 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 no. We have been separated from humans for far too long. Please bring your noisy children, and we will adjust. So they had a bubble service, and my children are flinging bubbles everywhere. Every time anybody said joy, they were allowed to be themselves. I've really enjoyed how welcoming and accepting it is here, that I can be myself. It's okay to be noisy. It's okay not to pay attention. How many times have I come here and I'm staring out the window, just absolutely, my whole week has been crazy. This is the first time I can just sit down and I'm like, I'm not even paying attention, but I'm sitting here amongst the people that I love, and then someone will say something, and it's awesome. For me, this is a place where it's okay to be authentic, nervous, fidgety, scared, making noises. Kids can make noises. Adults can make noises if you have to. It's a place where it's okay to be late. Sometimes I have come in for the last song. I know other people, like with their different neurodivergent issues, have to be early because that's an anxiety thing. But for me, I'm like, I just need to know that I can show up and see other humans, and they just accept me and love me as I am. It's also okay to send Dick Shope your bio after the service has already started. But for me, Gettysburg has been such a healing place after Tennessee. I had returned to my Grand Canyon home, but it's still here is where I found the healing I needed. I'm walking down the road, and a rainbow flag is like flapping in the wind and just like whoosh, right across my head, like, oh, you've been baptized in a different, better way. Like, I'm here, I've arrived. I have found that Gettysburg is a place of healing and hope. And this building is a place for the weary, the lonely, the bold, the scared, the revolutionary, just any person. The art on the walls today really makes me think, like, the art here from Sarah Jacobs, like all these beautiful, happy faces, even though we all experience sorrow too, this is what it feels like walking in the doors to me, is this like explosion of joy. And it feels like you to me. And the most important thing is, I showed up, there weren't many people here. I was nervous about being here, but because of things going on in my family, I was told to find another place that is welcoming for children who march to the beat of a different drummer and have different identities and different things going on. And there wasn't that place. I called all these numbers, and it's all stuff for teens or older kids, and nothing existed. And I was like, I am coming to this building, and I will keep showing up, and I will keep inviting people until there is a place where my children have other humans like them, where there's community, and now there is. And so I'm very happy and grateful for that. So thank you very much. Love to you all.